Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Allen Storey, and welcome to the fifth talk of the Frontline Club series, Looking at the Still Image. We'll be broadcasting this program the first Thursday of every month. Please nip into the Frontline website to view all their events that Planvera has organized, which is quite an amazing array of journalism and visual storytelling. This series features the influence and the impact of the still photograph, and there are many different renditions that we have. Today's theme is photography rocks, and I'm really looking forward to this show because I am a big fan. Through the show, we will experience backstage pass to the most historic moments of music photography through the ages. The talk will bring fascinating insights into the world of photographers who had a rare access to the artist. The conversation will explore live performance, backstage, documentary, portraiture photography, and probably some things that I haven't even thought about. After everyone has had an opportunity to chat and talk about the imagery that they've created, we will have a Q&A with after all the panelists have spoken, and we invite people to please participate. So just to introduce the panelists, Elliot Landy is an American photographer and a writer, and best known probably, and you can correct me, Elliot, for your iconic images and photographs from the 60s classic rock period. Elliot was one of the first music photographers to be recognized as an artist. He photographed many of the underground rock and roll superstars, both backstage and on stage from 67 to 69. His images of
60,
Bob, pardon? 1960.
67.
67 to
Yeah.
69. Okay. His images of Bob Dylan and the band Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Joan Baez, Van Morrison, Richie Havens, and many others
Woodstock Festival.
documented the music scene during the classic rock and roll period, which culminated in a very famous festival, which probably was the kickoff of all music festivals, which was the 1969 Woodstock Festival, which I really am so sorry I never attended. That really makes me very, very unhappy. And Ed Robinson, who I know very well, started his photography career as a music photographer with commissions photographing some of the biggest names in the industry, including Led Zeppelin, Sting, Carl Cox, to name a few. And in 2006, Ed started his own visual consultancy and production company called OneRedEye, which creates award-winning cutting-edge photographic content for some of the world's most famous bands. Recently, Ed set up the Prince for Music initiative to support Stagehand's COVID-19 live music crew relief fund. The initiative, and Ed can tell you a bit about it after, was an idea where these people were not getting any work at all. And many, many photographers contributed their pictures, and he raised over 115,000 pounds, which I think was actually astonishing.
Yeah, for the crews that make all these music events happen. That's essentially who
That's
the money was for.
what it's all about. Absolutely. And they don't quite have a catalog and other things where they can earn some money. Rachel is is a Los Angeles-based photographer, originally from England. I don't know where exactly, Rachel, you can tell us later. Rachel delivers dynamic and nuanced portraits capturing unguarded, narrative-led moments, revealing a sense of the humanity that connects us all. Her photographs and personality are a unique blend of British irreverence, New York energy, and laid-back California. Well, that's about as good as it's going to get as far as I'm concerned. So with that introduction, Rachel, would you kick it off for us, please?
Sure. So let's see, here we go. The first image we have here is the woman du jour, Billie Eilish. I thought I would start with her because she's so unbelievably famous now. And she was at the time, but this was before her first album was released. So it was a kind of an interesting period in her career, and it was just before her 17th birthday. And I'll admit I didn't actually know that much about her before I went to do the shoot and when NME gave me the call. And I didn't really know what to expect because I thought I was going to be getting a teenager, and kind of didn't think to myself about how teenagers are very different now to when I was a teenager. So she was extremely self-assured and extremely confident, and she took direction, but she kind of knew how she wanted to look and knew how she wanted to be. And I'm always happy to work with that, because I think artists, you know, especially somebody like her who is so creatively and aesthetically aware of who she is and what she's putting out, I kind of let artists roll with that. So yeah, she was coming to the end of what seemed like had been a really busy year for her, but it was still, I think it was like 3 months before her album was released, and she was kind of, I don't know if it was just her being a teenager, but she seemed kind of jaded, and she was very tired, and she just kept on saying how tired she was. And I was like, oh my God, you haven't even released your first album yet. Just you wait. And I think I actually said that to her as well. And obviously she then started touring the world and becoming this huge megastar that she is now. But I think even now when I look at pictures of her, even though, so that was late 2008, it was only a couple of years ago, but I guess she was 16, almost 17 at the time, and she's must be like 19 now, and that's like 100 years in teen years. And she looks more like a little girl to me in these pictures than she does now. And obviously her hair changes color a lot, so pictures get dated quite quickly with her. But yeah, that was a really interesting shoot to do with someone who then goes on to become a megastar, because I look at her now and I just kind of think like, I've been around her and I know what she's like. I know how tiny she is and stuff like that. When my 13-year-old niece thinks I'm a goddess now because I've been in her presence. But yeah, that's Billie. Okay, and this is my eternal woman du jour, Debbie Harry. And Chris Stein and Debbie this was for Q magazine. And when I got the call for this, I happened to be in England at the time, and they were in London. I think they were promoting a new album. And I don't really get starstruck, but sometimes I'll be looking through, I think because when you look through the camera, it's like a tiny little screen almost. And so it's not like they're not really there. But these two, I was just like, oh, they're so cool. And I know Billie Eilish is obviously very cool to my 13-year-old niece, but to me, this is cool. And I always find older people a bit more interesting as well, maybe because I'm getting a bit older and I'm kind of turning into my dad. But yeah, they were just really, really cool. And I was talking to a young photographer recently, and he was asking me, like, how do you kind of be around famous people? And I wasn't sure what he meant at first, but then I kind of figured out that I think he had a shoot coming up that he was a bit nervous about because it was somebody who was well known. And I just said to him that I always say reverence, not deference. And those two words are very similar, but I kind of see reverence as more being respectful and deference as being more submissive. And I think if you're submissive, then you put yourself at a different level. And you know, we're humans, we kind of work on energy, and they can feel it and they think they're the boss, and that you've got to have this energetic conversation where you need them on your level to work together. But when somebody is this much of a megastar, I do have a little bit of deference as well, because it's Debbie Harry, you've kind of got to. And also calling her Debbie was a bit strange, because she's always just been Debbie Harry. So and it happened with Phil Collins as well, actually. When you've said somebody's name over and over again and use their full name, when you're on a set directing them and they're just like plain old Debbie and plain old Phil, it just feels completely wrong just to use their first names. So every time I said Debbie, I was like, I can't just call her Debbie. She's Debbie Harry. But yeah, that was a cool shoot. This is the 1975, and this was a cover shoot for Q magazine, and it was done when they were recording, I think it was their third album in LA, and they had a fancy studio in the Hollywood Hills, and they wanted everybody to come to them to do press. And this is a really good example of you needing an artist to kind of work with you. Like, I don't think I could have done this with any other artist, because I needed them and their commitment and their collaboration, and most artists aren't as committed or willing to collaborate as these guys. And it really did take a village, because I went over to the studio a couple of days beforehand and discussed ideas with Matty, and the studio didn't kind of really have a lot going on location wise. And then he, off the cuff, just said, why don't we do it in the pool? And I immediately dismissed it as like, you're insane, no. He also suggested we all do it naked. And I was like, no, that not me, them. And I saw the rest of the band just be like, I was like, no, Q Magazine's not that kind of magazine. We'll keep clothes on, but we'll do it in the pool. I kind of just decided like, yeah, let's do it. And I don't know what came over me because yeah, an underwater shoot is not for the faint-hearted. And I'm glad I didn't know that going into it. Yeah, I don't know what came over me, but it was a very scary experiment, and I didn't know if it was going to work, but because they were so committed to doing it and trying it, and even when like Matty was more committed than the others because the others were cold, and being in wet jeans is really gross. But he kept making them go down for another take and go down for another take. And even when I said, I think we've got it, they were like, no, we're going to do more. And I was like, okay. So that was, yeah, I'm not sure I could ever recreate something like that again, because I think it was the alchemy of the day and their relationship together, and the publicist not rushing us even though we were running late. She was like, yeah, keep going. The manager sat there and he was into it and enjoying it. And yeah, it was just a really kind of magical day. And I'd say that is probably my favorite shoot, and not even because of the result really. It was more the feeling of the shoot, and because I was experimenting and having fun and getting something back from the artist. And when you're pulling teeth with an artist, it can be quite excruciating. So when an artist is that giving and that willing, it's like, it just can be so much fun. So yeah.
I love this picture. It makes me giggle.
This is Kid Rock in his Alabama trailer, and it's actually a double wide trailer. He's got two because he didn't want to wait around for the builders to build him a house. So he went to the trailer store and said, give me two of your most expensive double wide trailers. And this is his man cave trailer, and the other trailer is the one that he like lives in with his girlfriend. And this is where they hunt, and there was a lot of taxidermy around. So I picked this one because this is a good example of like trying to find common ground with somebody. Obviously you kind of go into these situations, and I'm English and I'm in America, so there's kind of that kind of difference between a lot of the people I take pictures of, this cultural difference. And then you get flown to Troy, Alabama to go to Kid Rock's hunting lodge. You have to try and find common ground there. And he was not that willing or collaborative. I think he was hungover. He definitely wasn't in a very good mood. And it was me, and this was for Q Magazine. It was me and the journalist. And I always loved doing it. It became rarer, but earlier on when I was shooting for Q, me and the journalist would go, the journalist and I would go on trips together, and we would experience everything together. And it would really help me to see that we're experiencing the same thing. So I kind of had an idea of what to illustrate. And the first time I did a shoot where I'd done a lot of those shoots, and then I had a shoot, I think it was with St. Vincent, where the interview had already taken place. I'd had nothing to do. I think Sylvia Patterson did the interview, and I hadn't even spoken to her. And I felt a bit naked because I didn't know what I was supposed to be illustrating. So I got used to that after a while, but I love when I get to go on a trip with a journalist and we have a really good adventure, and we kind of like just have weird stories to share afterwards. And the writer and I on this one, Kid Rock didn't want any publicists or any management or any record label people there. He just wanted us. And I think it was him trying to have control, because he was playing a lot of control games on the day, and he really didn't want to be doing it. And he'd said that everybody has to come here, come to Troy, Alabama. I'm not going anywhere to do press. And I could tell the writer didn't want to do the interview first. And I didn't particularly want to do the shoot first because we hadn't really broken the ice. And we'd already walked around his property and there was like lion rugs and the bear and just like baby deer on the fire, like just awful. There was a dead deer that they'd shot with a bow and arrow that morning hanging as we arrived on the property. And I think that was a bit of a control game from him as well. Like he knew he was getting two kind of liberal city people coming, so he thought he'd kind of mess with us a little bit. And we'd seen all his gun cabinets and stuff. And we kind of sat there and I could tell the writer really didn't want to go straight into the interview. And I wasn't ready to kind of start shooting yet. So he'd shown us his machine gun and I don't know why, but I just thought I need to break the ice here. And I went, can I have a go on your machine gun? And he kind of looked a bit shocked and he was like, okay. And he took us outside and I just fired his machine gun across his leg. And I think when I thought about it afterwards, I think it was like an intuitive thing that I did where I wanted to break the ice. I also did want to have a go on a machine gun and that was my opportunity. But it was like, I was letting him be the boss and letting him be in control, like showing this silly screaming girl how to use a machine. And I was screaming because it was out. And I think that really broke the ice, but it made him think he was in complete control, which let me kind of wrestle control back here and there and win him over a little bit. And it was just a bit of fun. So yeah, it was interesting, but yeah, I shot Kid Rock's machine gun. So
A private conversation about your machine gun skill well after this program.
my machine gun skill was not good. Every time I shot it, I'd go back and up, and he was like, no, bring it down. Because I would just go, and scream. And
Okay, Rachel, we're gonna have
yeah, that
to give a little bit of a speed
Yes.
up. Okay.
Speed up. Okay, so 50 Cent. This was for Q Magazine, and it was a conceptual shoot. And I am not that's not my comfort zone. Concepts. I like telling a story with real stuff and real locations. And I had to come up with a concept in a studio, and I pitched it to management that we would do a birthday party because it was what was his famous song? Go Shorty, it's your birthday, that thing. And they went for it, and I didn't think they would. And then when he showed up, I think he was expecting some kind of high production value, like with extras, like an expensive video shoot. And he showed up and there was a piñata and balloons and string that I'd blown up myself with my assistant, and I'd filled the piñata in my apartment the night before. And he kind of looked at the set and he was like, and I thought, oh my God, he thought this was going to be something else. And I really had to work hard he was kind of icy and I had to win him over. And I think he was tough, but he went with it in the end. And like by the point we were doing all this and he was kind of giving me finger guns, he'd stopped giving me like rapper face by that point. So he got into it. I think he liked it. This is Mac Miller this was around, I think this was like 3 weeks before he died. So it was one of his last shoots, and it was so sad. I was so sad when I found out about him dying, because he just had this impish, naughty schoolboy energy about him, and he was just really sweet. And it was just such a waste because he was funny, and he had a tweet that Jay-Z had written him framed on his hallway wall, and the chest of drawers that he's in front of, he was very, very proud of, because I think it was his first kind of grown-up, expensive adult purchase. And so he was really pleased to kind of have them in the photo. And yeah, it's just a waste. I think the intimacy of going to somebody's house as well. I'm quite nosy. I'm a bit like Lloyd Grossman through the keyhole. I love looking around people's houses. But the intimacy of going to someone's house is really special. And then to see on the news a few weeks later that his body like leaving in a coroner's van from the house that I'd been at a few weeks beforehand, it was, yeah. And I think that kind of helped teach me the importance of capturing a moment. And I'm sure Elliot has been doing this much longer than I have, and he's captured moments with people that you realize how special that is, and what a privilege that is, that to have got that. So yeah. I'll keep this one quick. This was the direction I gave Robbie, was give me the Smash Hits eyebrow, because when I was a teenager, I was actually properly in love with him when I was a teenager. And I got to go to his house in Beverly Hills, which was strange because he lives in this strange gilded cage where the staff have staff, and very weird, lonely place. But I used to read Smash Hits and have pictures of him on the wall from Smash Hits. And he always used to do this cheeky eyebrow thing that I loved as a teenager. And we'd got on quite well during the day. And I just said, give me the Smash Hits eyebrow. And he looked at me and I went, and I kind of did it for him. And he burst out laughing. And then he just did it. And I took the picture, and then he was just cackling afterwards. So I don't think anybody had probably ever said that to him for a long time. But yeah, that's Robbie's Smash Hits eyebrow.
Excellent.
And this is Brittany Howard. And I chose this because this is an example of kind of going with the artist's energy, because I'd planned to do something quite upbeat and fun. And then the morning of the shoot, I woke up in a really filthy mood. And I was like, I don't want to do a fun, upbeat, peppy shoot. And then I suddenly thought, like, I wonder if I've ever asked an artist to do that and they're just not in that mood. So when I got to Britain, I got there, I just said, what mood are you in? And she was like, what? And I went, what mood are you in? And she went, well, actually, I'm really sick, and I've been sick for days. I'm having to do shows and I'm just not feeling any of it. And I was like, okay. And she was like, nobody's ever asked that before. And I thought, I'm going to keep asking that, because if I'd asked her to do something peppy when she had a stinking cold and had to be on stage that night and had been on stage the night before, it just would have been wrong. And actually, we just had a really relaxed shoot, and it just kind of, it was one of those shoots where I was like, this will just be what it's going to be. And luckily I was shooting for Mojo, and they're quite happy to say, like, oh, do what you do. And so I'm quite lucky in that respect. But yeah, so that was Brittany in relaxed mood. This is Ryan Adams, who is the most difficult person I've ever worked with. I worked with him on a Q shoot about a month before this shoot, and he was impossible. And I kind of get a bit like a stern mum when they're being difficult, because I will not, if they're being difficult for a reason, fine. But if they're being difficult just because they're famous and they're used to it and everybody just says yes all the time, I don't let them get away with it. And I was in my head, I was like, I'm not leaving here. I'm not going back to Q magazine and saying, oh, he was difficult. I was like, you are going to give me what I came here for. And so I was quite stern with him. And by the end of it, he got into it. And then when we finished, he gave me a hug and he was like, thank you for dealing with me. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And then a month later, I got the call from his management to do his press shots, because I guess I was the only person that could deal with it. But yeah, he's a character.
All right, we're really running out of time.
Sure. This was just a quick one, Thelma and Louise trip to Vasquez Rocks, where it was just me and Cat Power. And it was a really special day because, again, no publicist, and it was just the two of us. And the park where those rocks are were empty. So it was just a very intimate situation. And it was just, and I love this quiet moment because it really kind of captures the day that we had together. But yes.
Well, that was fabulous, and we'll have a further conversation on so many pictures.
Sure.
I want to ask you 1,000 questions. Elliot,
Yes, I'm here.
stage. Rock and roll.
I'm here. How much time do I have for this?
Oh, for 2 days, we're just never going to stop. We're just going to continuously record.
No, I'm serious. All right. Anyway, rock and roll photography was not what I was doing. When I was beginning my photography, I began in the United States. I began working with underground newspapers to try and help stop the Vietnam War, to do pieces on women's rights movement and so on. and I was really an activist in that area. In my heart, I was. And then the reason I worked with underground newspapers was that the mainstream media wouldn't publish any of the peace demonstration photographs I was taking. And this is a picture taken at the Pentagon Peace March in 1967, I guess it was, maybe 68. Gosh, I forget. So I did a number of these peace demonstrations, and then one evening when I was through, I became the photo editor of an underground newspaper called The Rat, meaning The Rat's Subterranean News. And one evening I was finished with the newspaper, we put it to bed, and I was walking along 2nd Avenue. And can you flip to the next picture? Okay. And I saw a marquee that said Country Joe and the Fish Light Show. And this is not that concert, but it's the next one I went to at the Anderson Theater. I had no idea what a light show was, and no idea certainly what Country Joe and the Fish were. And I went over to the box office and I showed my press pass, and they let me in. And I was met by this incredible light and sound imagery of what light shows were about. And light shows are really a group of musicians who were playing with lights and colors and slides and movies and photographs in time to the music. It was not like what we have today, where we have video pieces that are pre-orchestrated. The light shows were really spontaneous jam sessions with the rock and roll bands. Anyway, so I took pictures at that one, and then I went back 2 weeks later to the next concert they were having, and that was Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin. And this is one of the pictures I took there that night. And okay, next picture. And then I continued to take pictures of these concerts and light shows and so on. This one was at the Fillmore East, obviously the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And then I would publish these pictures. I wasn't getting paid for them. When I would publish these pictures, I would talk about how beautiful the experience was, trying to invite people to become part of this new culture, this new way of thinking. So they would practice love, not war. They would practice enjoying themselves rather than hating other people. And trying to invite them down to a culture where you walked in the auditorium and everybody was your friend. Everybody was had smoke, not everybody, how can I say everybody? But most likely, most of the people there were certainly smoking grass, and you would be offered joints, and it was just very free. And by sharing the beauty of these musicians and hoping that they would get to hear the music after they see the picture and so on, I was really I was proselytizing for this new way of being, which is what the 60s cultural experience introduced to us. So again, it was really an activist thing. However, I was very much in love with the music I was hearing. And if I couldn't, if I didn't like the music, I wasn't able to photograph it. Actually, I was almost paralyzed. My sense of doing things is very much all one. So if I don't like what I'm hearing, I can't really enjoy myself visually or want to take pictures of something. But fortunately, there was a lot of good music in those years. And so this one, could you go back on that picture for a minute? Thank you. This picture is interesting to me because there was, I think, 2 or 3 bands that night. Maybe, I think it was one, I think it was Sly and the Family Stone also that night. And I had just photographed them quite a bit. It was a long set and I was really tired. And I said, oh, I'll get Hendrix another time. And so I put all my cameras away in my bags and I headed towards the back of the auditorium, and I was about to leave. Right, I had my hand, oh, you can't see me. I had my hands on the exit bar of the door and I was about to go out. And as I was going to push it, I heard his first notes, like boing, whatever. And I was transfixed. And I stood there for a while. I turned around, I looked at it, and I stood there for a while, and I listened. And then after a while, I went to the back of the auditorium. I said, oh, I'll take a few pictures. So I took this photograph from the very back of the auditorium, and then I went up forward. Can you go forward, please? And took picture like this also, and a whole bunch of other pictures I think are really nice. So suddenly I wasn't tired anymore. Okay. Now that led to being asked, the picture of Janis Joplin especially were seen by Albert Grossman. Albert Grossman was Bob Dylan's manager, and he was managing Janis Joplin also. And I took some pictures at a press party, and I showed them to the record label, and I dropped them off at Albert's office. They could see it. And Albert just fell in love with one of the photographs. Um, and previous to that, I had a run-in with Albert. And I think in early '68, Bob Dylan was appearing at Carnegie Hall for the first time in a year that people thought he had died. It was the Woody Guthrie Memorial Concert. And I had gotten tickets to go, and I was sitting in the audience, and no pictures were allowed, which I didn't know when I went there. I got the tickets by telling him I was a photographer. So I had snuck my camera in, which I wouldn't have planned to do, actually. That's not how I operate. But in this case, I went there and they had given me a ticket to photograph. So anyway, I was taking pictures during the show very discreetly and quietly. And then one of Albert's people saw me taking pictures, and I had an interaction with him that wasn't pleasant, actually. And you can read about this in my book. My book is Woodstock Vision: The Spirit of a Generation. So we didn't get along too well at all. And then when I was photographing Janis, also, I had to go up to his office one time, and he asked somebody to ask me. Anyway, so I was photographing Janis Joplin one evening at the Club Generation. Club Generation later became Jimi Hendrix's studio, Electric Ladyland. And I was at the back of the crowd, and somebody taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, and there's Albert, and I thought, oh, and he waves to me, come with me, come with me. And I wasn't, it wasn't negative, so I didn't feel any fear, any anxiety. Not fear is not the word, any anxiety about it. But I wondered, is he going to kick me out of this also? He's going to. But so he takes me into like a large utility closet room, and they have cleaning stuff there. And he said to me, "Are you busy next weekend?" And I said no. And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I have this new band that we need pictures of." And I said, "What's their name?" He said, "Well, they don't have a name yet. I don't know if any of you know the story of the band, but they didn't, in the beginning, they didn't want to have, they didn't want to be pigeonholed into doing one kind of music." Anyway, so we had this conversation, and I always think back to what my career, so to speak, would have been if I had said to him I was busy that following weekend and hadn't taken these pictures. So this picture itself is, I did 3 sessions with them, and beautiful pictures in all the sessions. Also, when I photograph, I don't normally tell people what to do. I wait for them to do whatever they do, and I follow them around, and I do whatever I do. And it's usually not usually uncomfortable, but there was no, well, I got along with these guys very well, but it's not through charm. In other words, I don't talk very much when I photograph. I let people do what they want, and I help. But anyway, in this case with them, we had 2 sessions and really nice pictures, but they said, this is not really what we want. We want, it's just, we don't know what we want, but they're beautiful photographs. We love them. So anyway, I was forced to think about and set up the picture. So I had gotten to know them in those years. I'd gotten to know them, and they were very grounded, very old-fashioned kind of people. When we were walking together in Woodstock, for instance, through town, they were so gracious to everybody they met. It was like, "Hi, how you doing?" It wasn't like this hippie thing where you just kind of walk by someone and you nod to them and whatever, almost flippant, not in a negative way, but just in a let's spend our time on important things way. So the guys in the band were not like that. They paid as much respect to a counter clerk in the grocery store as they did to a record company executive. And I was really impressed with that. I said, so, which is very old fashioned. Everyone is very polite to each other, at least in society. So I felt that an old fashioned picture would be appropriate for them. And I had just gotten a book of Matthew Brady, Civil Era photographs, Civil War era photographs. And I thought, that's the perfect look for them. So I showed them the book, and they kind of liked the idea. I mean, they liked the idea. And then I had to find the location, and we drove around for a day, I think, all over Woodstock to drive me here, there. and nothing really worked. And we went back to their house and smoked some grass there. Then I look out the front window, and there was the landscape I was looking for, which is the landscape you're seeing right here. And it was just perfect. So it's right where they lived. And then we went, and I said, this is it, let's go outside. And I took 2 or 3 rolls of film, I think, and because I wasn't really, I just let them move around, stand how they want to stand. They moved over here, they moved over there. And maybe I told them a little bit to this way or that way, but I try not to be controlling. In some cases, you have to be. Anyway, so this is the picture we got, and I spoke long enough about it already. So
And so we move on. So you go from front to back at it.
from what, yeah, well, this was the first picture I took of them, actually, the first time I was there. This pond was right behind their house, and so was the bench. And we're just walking around. There's no organization here at all. And so maybe they sat down on the bench like this. Obviously, they don't fit on the bench, and so on. And this picture was on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, like right away. I don't know how they got it. I had given some pictures to Albert's office, and they probably gave it to Rolling Stone when they wanted press work and so on. And so this was, I think it's a really gorgeous photograph. And interestingly enough, is they had said they wanted to be anonymous. They didn't know, Albert told me this, they didn't know if they were going to have a name even. They just wanted to be 5 guys doing music so they could be free to play any genre of music that they wanted to. And they wouldn't be buttoned up into being this one kind of music that they did. They also didn't want any cutesy name like Jefferson Airplane, you know. I say they were not old fashioned. They weren't old fashioned people, certainly, but in their values and the way they thought life should be lived, they were in that sense. So anyway, so even despite the fact that this picture is totally gorgeous and did exactly what they wanted, was an anonymous photograph of them, it was a little too anonymous, I think. And then we went on to do the other 2 shoots and so on. So, okay. And this is in those years, this is a photograph of Richard Manuel from the band. And in those years, lenses weren't very sensitive. And the most sensitive lens you could get was I'll be technical a little bit, was a 280 millimeter f4.0 lens. That's the size of the aperture that you see through, which means you need a lot of light for it. And that was really slow. These light shows that I was photographing at were not like today's lights where you're almost in daylight when you're watching a concert. So, and also the film of those years was not that sensitive either. Anyway, so I had gotten a lens from East Germany, an old lens, a pre-war lens, and adapted it to my Nikon camera. The lens was a 2.8 lens, which means it needed half the light that the other normal telephoto lens needed. The reason I'm talking about that is because it was such an old lens, it had a lot of light dispersion. And when you shoot into the light, you see those like light drops, I could call them, going on the person. And I love that. And it's also very soft like that. And for me, I used to shoot to get that effect because I really liked, I like the way this looks. And then soon after that, after I started photographing, they started what they call multi-coating lenses, which eliminated all of this. So you couldn't get this look. If you want to get this look, they have special filters now that you put on the front of the lens. But I never did that, but I don't know if it's quite the same. Anyway, that's how that look came. And I call this I Shall Be Released. That was one of the songs written by Richard and Bob Dylan. And Richard passed away young. He committed suicide at some point way after they were famous. Anyway, he was a very sensitive, very spiritual man. And so I Shall Be Released is the perfect caption for this.
Mm.
Okay. Van Morrison, another shy guy. But see, I'm a shy guy, actually. I really don't, I'm not very good at maybe now in my older years, I'm a little bit better, but I don't kind of make up conversations to talk with people. I don't have a lot to say to people, at least depends who the person is, actually. So with Van, I went out, he had moved to Woodstock and I had been living in Woodstock. Since I started photographing the band, I decided to move up to Woodstock. That's a story there's no time for. But so I go over to his house, and my wife likes me to emphasize this part of the story. And he has a giant pimple on his forehead right above his left eye, which is you can't see in the frame. And my style of photography in those years, I always like to go up close and take a picture framed like this. This was the norm for me to do. And to do that, you needed not special lenses, but some lenses went that close and some didn't. So I made sure to have a lens that I could do that with. So I was able to crop it in. But when I would take pictures like this and show them to an art director or whatever, they would invariably say, "Oh, why'd you cut off his forehead? You know, why'd you cut off his head, the top of his head was, and those years they didn't like that style. They were used to record album covers being like a Frank Sinatra kind of picture and so on. So that's the story of this. And there's no lighting. This is natural light. This was the light that was filtering into the room, and there were wooden walls. And this was it just turned yellow like this, very much a Van Gogh-like looking picture. Which is really what Van's about. In that way, he's very much impressionistic and very much, I don't know, in his music, he's not very, I don't know, his music is very poetic, as Van Gogh's paintings were, as opposed to some of the realist paintings of those times. Okay. Next picture, please. And then I was always in, for me, photography is only about the picture. It's the taking a picture is only about the composition and the way it looks and so on. And really who's in front of the lens almost doesn't matter as long as they look nice. So I was experimenting with things like infrared color film. And that's what this was taken with. I have a series of these things, not as many as I wish I should have taken. But infrared color film is sensitive to infrared light as well as the normal light spectrum. And you had to, you had to use a filter I'm going like this, you have to use a filter in front of the lens. If you don't use a filter, it comes out very purplish. So Kodak recommended an orange filter, a yellow filter rather, which gives you somewhat a natural look. I'll show you another picture later on taken with yellow filter. Anyway, this one was taken with a green filter, and it's on the site where they built the Javits Center in New York City. It's John Lee Hooker, by the way. And they didn't use it for the album cover. They used something else. I took a few of these for albums, and only one album used some on the cover, even though it's, I think, a gorgeous photograph. So that's John Lee Hooker, infrared color film, New York City, 1968. Okay. This is Bob Dylan, and also taken with infrared color film. And here I use the yellow filter that was recommended, and the trees were green. And what it is, it's the infrared radiation, which is sensitive to heat, turned these trees red, along with the orange. What the orange filter does, as you see, his skin looks somewhat normal. The original is a little more blue than this. I've changed the color a bit, but your skin isn't that hot, but the radiation, the energy coming from the trees affects the film, so it turned red. And the story of Bob Dylan, I don't know if I have any time for that, but I was asked to photograph him for the Saturday Post. I got a call from a journalist named Al Aronowitz, who was friends with the band, and I had known Al when I was photographing the band. And Al said to me, we need a picture. Bob wants a picture for the cover of the Saturday Post. So I was living in New York City. I drove up to Woodstock, and Al meets me in town in his car and says, "Follow me." He drives me up through these winding roads in Woodstock with forests and trees and stuff. And he pulls into a driveway and he stops the car and he gets out. He says, "Stay here." And he kind of walks quickly into the house, a big wooden house, right? Comes out 5 minutes later with Bob following him. And he brings us together and he says, "Elliot, this is Bob. Bob, this is Elliot." Jumps in his car, almost like he committed a crime, and drives off, leaving me standing 10 feet away from what at that time was the most important musician in the world, according to what I thought, and most people of my generation feel, because of the importance of his words, as well as the style of music he was doing, and so on. And so he just, once again, there wasn't a lot of conversation between us, if any. He told me he liked my photographs of the band. And he just picked up his guitar and sat down on a nearby log or something like that. He had a pile of wood and picked up his guitar and started playing. I'm going like this. He started playing and singing, and I thought, wow, here I am 10 feet away from the most important musician in the world. And this is such a special moment. And I realized that other people would be completely knocked out by being here at this moment, hearing this man sing so close and so on. But to me, it feels normal. And I thought, and all I was saying, I realized that even though I realized, and this is what Carol was saying before, how special life is. Maybe it wasn't Carol, I'm sorry. But anyway, how special life is. And the moments we should really cherish, not special moments, but every moment, because it's really nice to be alive. And anyway, so I saw that it was how special it was, and realized I didn't feel all I was doing was focusing on getting the picture and composing it and so on and so forth. And we talked and to each other, and I don't remember what we said, but we got along really well. And I went back a week later when I had processed the film, and I showed him the pictures, and he picked out one for the cover of the Saturday Post, and neither one of us really saw how remarkable this picture was. I don't know if I must have showed it to him, because I showed him everything, but it could have taken too long to process or something. I'm not sure, but neither one of us picked this one out. It wouldn't have been appropriate for the Saturday Post, which was, sorry, I forgot to do this.
That's the whole beauty of doing Zooming. You never know what's going to happen.
Well, usually I do Zooms every Thursday night, and I usually turn everything in the house off, but I didn't. Anyway, so I showed him the photographs, and then he asked me to take some pictures. Oh, so he said, "Are you going back to the city?" And I said, "No, I'm going to stay over at Rick's house." It was Rick and Levon from the band had said to me, anytime I wanted to stay over, I could just do that. So he said, "Why don't you stay upstairs? I have a room upstairs, and you're welcome to stay if you want." So of course I did. And then the next morning, or maybe he asked me to photograph him and his wife and children, which I was very touched by. And it was very touched by, because I think that love of family, love of anyone, and love of children and love of your own family teaches you to love other people. I was very touched by how beautiful it was. Just, it wasn't, the fact that it was Bob Dylan didn't mean anything to me. But just the beauty of how close they were and how much he loved his kids. And Sarah, his wife, was absolutely charmingly nice, and gracious. So I had a bit of a friendship with him in those years, actually. There's some more stories, but not for now.
He certainly is when you had photographed him, and today, I mean, everybody knows who Bob Dylan is, and particularly his lyrics and so on. We're going to have to do a bit of a speed up
Okay.
now. I mean,
I think there's only one more. And this is, while we were photographing, he asked if he could use my camera. So while I was photographing him, I say we photographing, because for me, it's always an interaction. And it's not, so we're just kind of dancing around each other in a, I guess, a spiritual sense in a way. So anyway, so he asked me if he could use my camera. So I gave him my camera, and he took this picture of me. So that's me in 1968. And the person on the left is his son, Jesse, who's there. And,
you had a hell of a haircut.
that's what I actually looked like that for many years. I then went to Europe and spent 7 years in Europe, and I didn't shave or barely cut my hair, but I guess maybe that's what made them know that I wasn't part of the establishment that they had to fear, the musicians of this time, because people were against, like, Big Brother and the Holding Company is a name from 1984, and they're the bad guys. So I don't know, perhaps that helped. I didn't do it intentionally, but that was me, I guess. That was real. I was really looking to do beautiful things and share them with people. That was always my inspiration and my reason for doing things. It still is. And I've been lucky in my life that I've been able to keep doing that. I haven't had a lot of money because I wanted to keep doing that, but I've certainly done a lot of work that I'm very happy with. And I stopped doing music photography after about a year and a half. It was right after Woodstock. I was the official photographer of the Woodstock Festival. And oh, actually, we have two more. So go ahead. Here's, this is Bob Dylan. I don't know if we have time for this, Carol. I don't want to take up more time. I can just leave it at saying this is the cover of the album Nashville Skyline. It was just the top half of it, just the portrait. And I got a lot of stories about that, but I'll skip those because.
Well, you know, when we come back with the conversation, we can go
Okay.
back to the
I
story.
do want to tell this story though. This is at the Woodstock Festival, and I was the official photographer of the festival, right? And when it rained, there was no cover anywhere for anyone. So I had a full-time stage access pass. So I went down underneath the stage. So here I am under the stage at Woodstock, and I had a panoramic camera, which means it takes a very wide angle photograph. And it was on my chest, and I pressed the shutter by accident. So this picture is an accidental photograph. But recently I realized here I was under the stage at Woodstock and didn't even think to take a selfie.
Those were the days. We'll come
And
back to, yeah, sorry, get to it.
this is the crowd at Woodstock. This is a few people at Woodstock, and I won't go into this whole thing, but I just want to say that this really shows the innocence of that the innocence that we're all striving for, because it's only through innocence and clarity and beauty that we can be who we like to be, who we're supposed to be, I'll say. And this young lady really personifies that here. She's obviously stoned. She's very fetching looking, but she's not in a come hither way sexual, right? She's holding a balloon, which is childlike. So you have to be childlike thing. She's grooving on the music. She's enjoying it. And nobody is at her at all. Everyone's just into their own thing and everyone trusts each other. You can't even step here. You see the guy behind her walking forward, but there's no room. Everyone is so squashed in. But everyone was just completely pieced out, let's say. The guy in the upper left is holding a glass bottle, a gallon glass jug. Can you imagine being allowed into a concert with anything glass these days? So this picture really personifies what the spirit, the essence of the time was of that festival, personified in the festival, but really what people were trying to seed on the earth, to change culture into this kind of a peaceful, loving, innocent space. Okay.
Excellent. Ed, you're up.
Excellent. Yes. So my first few slides are actually kind of starting at the beginning, really, well, almost the beginning. I think the first thing that I enjoyed about entering into music photography, and it's kind of where I cut my teeth actually taking pictures myself. I've done a bit of art directing before, but the ability to be able to experiment a bit, to try and be in environments which were incredibly fun, incredibly rewarding, not just for the music, because of the the visual experience as well. So one of the things that I really enjoyed doing was playing around with the aspect of strobe lights, the idea of long exposures, things like that. And actually it's something which I kind of go back to a little bit now, where I try to investigate where I began and where my roots were in photography. And one of the things I realized when I was going through this little journey at the beginning, and I think what this photograph represents is a few things, but from the perspective of the photograph that I've taken, it kind of explores something which I realized that I'd had for a little while, which was this, it's called synesthesia. It's written down there in the caption at the bottom. I can do a scientific explanation here, or at least, at the very least, the Wikipedia version. It's a perceptual phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experience in a second sensory or cognitive pathway. I mean, in layman's terms, essentially, when I hear music and certain music, I see waveforms and patterns sometimes in my vision. So I get a visual representation of the music when I hear it. And I think that what photography enables you to do is to try and communicate that, like many other art forms as well. And I think it's such an accessible way to do it too. So this was my kind of first exploration of trying to use strobe off-camera flash. So I could use an off-camera flash which transmitted from my camera top, and I could set it to a strobe, and I could try to capture in a longer exposure a moment. This particular picture here, which is from a night called The Break, was a couple of friends of mine, Charlie and Amanda, who were absolutely instrumental in getting me into some of these environments and settings, because they were producing these events, they were producing the gigs, and they were held in this place. This is the Comedy Cafe, always really small venues, and they cram a load of people in there. You'd be right up at the front. I'll be able to clamber through the people, even up onto stage, on the side of stage. I'll be able to put a flash gun over on one side and hang out on the other side. I quickly realized, obviously, that there's also the other side of it, which is that being that up front and that close also meant that you are part of the mosh pit, or you're part of the energy of the crowd as well. And you have to take that into account when you've got your camera gear hanging off you. And in those days, it was quite lightweight. And as I've kind of progressed through my career, the bags have got bigger, the lights have got bigger. Everything I bring with me sort of sometimes needs a bigger and bigger pickup truck to carry it. And actually, when you think about it, getting back to the kind of true roots of where you come from and what you explored with, I didn't need much. In fact, moving on to the next frame as well, this is Freedom High, a band that I'd met at a similar time as well, and I was exploring the idea of then again using the lights on the stage and a little popper flash there as well. And for this one here, it was about the energy of the performance, actually seeing the band members as a kind of more abstract form there, represents the kind of music and energy that I was experiencing at the time too. So I love this shot for that fact. And the lead singer there is kind of is obviously shouting or singing a very powerful lyric, and that's the moment that it comes across. In the next frame across as well, my next shot here, this one here is where sometimes you're in a setting as a photographer shooting live where you may only have access to one lens, and I think Elliot alluded to this earlier as well. That sometimes the equipment that you might have might not be the most high tech. You might not have the most sensitive film or sensor nowadays as well. But actually the things that you can use out of a live performance can sometimes give you those creative moments as well. So I did a bit of the Uncle tour back in the day, and this is at the Roundhouse in Camden. And there's a chap called Jerry, and he was in control of the lighting. Very sadly, he's passed away now, but he was an absolutely amazing human being, but also incredible at creating and designing the lights that would go off and the strobes and the setting that the band would play in. So getting to know him and driving him around, he had one wooden leg as well, driving around to various festivals and gigs, and on this tour, we'd get a chance to chat about things. And one of the things that I also got to know about was, when are the strobes going to go off? Where should I be when this is going to happen? So gaining a little bit of knowledge about what was happening front of house and what was happening during the creation of the performance, and also where the freeform stuff was going on, because actually that still does happen. You still get moments where your lighting designers in front of house are able to freeform what the projections might be, where they might go, what the lighting might do. But there obviously has to be a connection between what the band and the aesthetic of the band want to portray within their performance. So for example, this one here is nothing to do with an off-camera flash. It's nothing to do with that at all. It's just knowing that at this point in time, I know through their performance, there's going to be a lot of strobing going on. And actually, to be fair with Uncle, there was always a lot of strobing going on as well. But at this particular point in time, I knew that we were going to get something quite cool with a silhouetted thing, a bit of crowd. It turned out probably a bit more abstract than I thought, but actually, that's why I love it even more as well. So it's about kind of understanding that there are so many elements that come to play in a live performance that you can use that connects you to that. Many a time, actually, I thought, going through my journey of learning live music photography, being, I thought I was a bit of a fraud, to be honest, because I thought that there was many times where I'm here and I'm just observing, I'm documenting something which is I'm not the band, I'm not the lighting designer, I'm just here and I'm just capturing it, and anybody can do this. But I think as you kind of get feedback through the images that you capture, and you realize yourself that you intended to do that, or it has that kind of meaning, that's where everyone has their own eye. And maybe it's one of those purest forms, really, where you can capture a performance going on and you can have your own take on it, and you can have your own influence on how that music is portrayed within the photograph. Okay, next frame, please. Okay, yes, Sting. So I'm part of this journey. This is sort of later on in my career where having cut my teeth doing various tours and doing some live music events, I was then picked up to do through people like Harvey Goldsmith, who produces major events. He did the original Live Aid back in the day. This was the Pavarotti Memorial Concert, and it was done in Petra, the most incredible location, and I've got the series of pictures there, photographs over a few days, which represented some of the biggest artists in opera, paying their respects to Pavarotti himself. And you've got various events that were taking place. There were even kind of journeys out into Wadi Rum, the desert as well. Everything I had to document, I was employed by the production company to do so. But obviously I wanted to bring something across as well, which was about the artist playing there and trying to get some personal moments, things that weren't just documenting the live performances. So this Sting I'd met, actually, I had met the night before, and there was a big dinner out in the part of the desert around Petra. And I being young and brave and bold, sometimes that doesn't wash off, maybe slightly stupid on occasion, but I thought, well, I need to go and introduce myself and, ask and request that I might want to do a portrait of him at some point whenever he's comfortable, potentially now. But at that point in time, it wasn't appropriate. There was some food going on. He said, well, I tell you what, and in his very calm and very peaceful manner, as Sting has, he's like, why don't you just come and join us and come and sit down and have some food with us? There's a seat beside us. So I sat there with Sting and Trudy, having food, having a chat with Sting on one side, talking about, well, tantric sex, all kinds of things as well. And I won't go into details of everything, but it was that moment, that incredibly fortunate moment where I could actually meet one of these artists that was there and had been so kind to invite me onto the table. So anyway, got to meet him, and it was a wonderful moment. And the following day, before he did his performance up on stage to honor Pavarotti and the passing of Pavarotti, and he was doing his own operatic performance, he gave me this moment backstage, and it was the moment that I was looking for. And it represents to me not just an honesty of a man that's there, and a lovely, wonderful man too, but it's also it's just something which gives me a sense of progression in my own career, a sense of moving on and moving from one place to the next as well. And for that, I really do love this portrait. And then there was Led Zeppelin's potentially last ever performance at the O2. And I was there for the rehearsals and then the performance the next day as well. The first part of the story is actually that at the rehearsals, I was sat down and just watching what was going on. There was only so much that we're allowed to take photographs of, and obviously some of which can't be shown even now as well. Everything is there's a lot of things that are completely wrapped up. There was a moment I recall when Jimmy Page, just like this, was rehearsing, rocking out on stage. Had Robert Plant sat on my left. He was having a cup of tea, completely just as his civvies, basically, not dressed up for performance. It was just rehearsals. And he turned around and he said, "This is effing cool, isn't it?" And it was just at that moment, I just thought, I just wish I had a shot of that, but perhaps I didn't need to, because again, it was about the experience of being there, of witnessing it. And then the following day, then to be there for this iconic event that was going on, that was a hot ticket at the time, was just phenomenal. However, there's always dramas that go on in these big things, and there's always lots of different people that play a part, especially with band reunions, as I've discovered through the years. There's always going to be a slight difference between what one of the artists want and one of the artists wants on the other side. So it's a classic Jimmy Robert Plant thing as well. There's always been arguments and differences and everything else. And I learned this because I had my own production office backstage with Ed Robinson on there. And the following days for the performance, that had been ripped off. Getty Images was on there. I was still allowed to shoot, and I shot around and everything else. And at the time, I used to wear a waistcoat and a trilby hat. And there was a point in time I was nudged by one of the production crew saying, "Okay, so you've been taking pictures, but just watch out for," I think it was Jimmy's security, because they haven't signed off you being here. So I had to ditch the hat, ditch the waistcoat, and find myself lost within the crowd for periods of time. At which point I got probably some of the best pictures that I actually got anyway, because I wasn't stuck right underneath the pit. So actually it was quite fortuitous. And there's a couple more here, just if you move on to the next one as well. Yeah, obviously, yeah, Robert with his lion-like locks nowadays. Again, it was just in terms of the audio-visual experience of that gig. It's funny because when you take photographs, and when we're often, because we are behind this little screen and the little eyepiece, we're often seeing things from a sort of removed experience, where actually you don't get to necessarily experience the music. And it's when you sometimes have to just step back and go, put your camera down and just realize where you are to soak up the energy again and actually appreciate it. But then sometimes you could lose your flow in actually what you're there to do, which is capturing the moment as well. So it's a funny balance. It's one which is, I suppose it takes a little bit of time to try to develop and get used to. Next picture. I mean, these guys rocking out on stage as well. I do like this picture. I think in terms of crops and things, it's a Marmite one for people, but I quite like it. It relates to actually probably having a limited set of lenses at the time, having known that I might be placed in a position which is far away from them, but actually at the very beginning being extremely close in the pit. I brought with me a I mean, for the non-technical, I apologize, but you can imagine one of these extremely long lenses. And then you get these things called doublers and multipliers that you can stick onto these long lenses, make them even longer, but you lose the ability for that camera to bring in as much light, etc. But I quite enjoyed that aspect of being limited into this kind of very kind of small zone of limitation of where we could actually, where we could see. So this is a crop which occurred because of the lens that I had at the time, but actually I was very comfortable with that as well. This is, I suppose it represents where, again, there's sometimes clashes of energy in situations, but sometimes it can create beautiful imagery as well.
Forward to Ed a bit.
Okay, all right, I'll speed up. Paloma Faith, this was actually a corporate event, and I was producing a coffee table book of the event itself, but also the artist that performing there. She was one of a few, but she was headlining it as well. Absolutely incredible artist, incredible woman as well. She, I really wanted to get something which was, again, just a portrait moment of her that wasn't just performance to open up this section of the book. And luckily I managed to do it. I spent a bit of time organizing these mannequins, knowing the exact spot. And of course, then management gets involved and you have to then negotiate with management. But luckily, with a little bit of charm, a little bit of gift of the gab, managed to get her to, well, the management to agree. She was absolutely fine with it and got this very kind of, I don't know, subtly sort of peaceful moment before a big stage performance, which I really enjoyed. That's one of my favorites, actually, talking about what I did before, where sometimes you see yourself going, I'm just a bit of a fraud if I'm doing live music photography and just capturing the moment. But actually, this was an important concert called Chive for Change at Twickenham. Doesn't matter about that. It's a Timbaland performing, and it could be any other performer, to be honest. I'm not a Timbaland fan. I don't, it's, I didn't necessarily know the music that was produced by Timbaland. But what I did get is I tried to represent the artist that was there on stage with this incredible lighting moment and really, try to sort of duck and dive around the light to try and find that perfect moment. And this is one of my favorite shots that I've taken. And it didn't matter about whether the artist was of importance to me or not, because obviously this artist is very important to a lot of other people as well. And that's sometimes our job as photographers as well, to represent that. And then the last little bit here is that, and I think we opened with it too in the talk, is that there was a moment obviously over our sort of lockdown period. This is a very abnormal period in our human lives where it's caused us to think about things that are more important than ourselves as well, and our own journeys and our own insights into things. And one of the things that was a huge part of the last lockdown, so this was back just before Christmas, was Prints for Music, which was a initiative that myself and my assistant Julie as well, Carol knows her well too, we were sat down going through my sort of archive photography, thinking, oh my God, I want to do something, not sure what to do, and not, I don't want it to be about me, and sort of crunching through it, came up with this. Literally, it's like on the back of a cigarette packet, really, isn't it? But it was on or a napkin. Came up with a concept which was, okay, let's do a charitable print sale and try and get some of the most amazing photographers around the world to provide their photography to raise money for essentially the people. And I talked about Charlie and Amanda, and there's Jim Baggett, there's Jerry, there's all these people that are in my life at the very beginning of my photography journey, that without them, none of what I do right now would have been possible. And also, obviously, for the artists that can't perform at the moment properly, that's obviously seeping back in that they may be able to, but it's still incredibly inhibited. It was incredibly important to me to try and do something which gave back to the people that were struggling the most. I'm fortunate, and we are as photographers, that we have back catalogues, we can do other things, and we can, and it's a varying story for everyone. Despite that, obviously, you know, and sometimes we don't make money from what we do. Despite that, I was absolutely heartened by the fact that there were so many that came together to essentially donate their work for such a worthy cause. In the end, you know, we had 179 photographs, sold over 1,000 prints, which was far more than we ever expected, supported by a wonderful print company called Genesis, who did all of that printing for free as well. And we raised £115,000 for Stagehand, which is a benevolent fund, but they essentially create grants, and ongoing they're creating grants for out of work roadies, crews, people that work in live music. There were 39 photographers as well. Rachel, you were one of them too, and thank you very much. And it was an absolute phenomenal success. And it's really been a highlight of these very strange times that you know, an industry completely separate from another comes together and is so charitable and giving, and has that heart to be able to help others in such an effective way. So it's a really interesting journey in my own photography career, to go back to some of the old stuff now, and even to talk now about some of those stories and moments from the past that were only possible because of those crews as well, and then to create something which helped so many too, was a fantastic and fitting end to end to last year.
Well, it certainly was a beyond a fitting end. This has been the most amazing chat, and I have to say, I'm just thinking about, because I wasn't asking questions. Normally, I love to interrogate whilst everybody speaks. But what's interesting is just a kind of a short, sharp snap of the different styles of photography and different ways of working that each of you have expressed. A very different method of working, and yet you're all working, you know, in music. You know, how Elliot, how you started out, and what the 60s was all about against the war in Vietnam, the evolvement of bringing people together. Woodstock was a phenomenon like I don't think anything has ever been duplicated ever, you know, since then, outside of some massive kind of political, social issues. It's just interesting to see and listen to, you know, all the backstories. And what Ed just said, you know, in terms of photographers coming together to give some of their energy and benefit other people that were really suffering, is very much, I think, the giving back, and what you were talking about, Elliot, and about how you respond to people and what you were shooting during you know, Woodstock. That picture that you were describing of the girl, she wasn't sexually, and her breasts weren't hanging out to say, look at me, and so on. It was just being good people and being kind and being spiritual, if you will. And there's something about that unites the three of you, about your approach, the honesty you have, the integrity in the imagery, and hearing the backstories. And it's, I think, so many people that look at the still image. You know, there's so many layers behind every single image that are taken. And for me, on a very personal basis, a still image is like listening to classical music, my favorite being Le Quatre Saisons by Vivaldi. And you have it played by different people, but you keep coming back to it. It's the same thing when you look at a still image. You discover something fresh in it. You haven't seen it before. And it makes you ask other questions, and it's magic. I think it's totally magic. But I'd like to get back to you, Rachel. Would you like to tell it, because we have some time, and Vera, you got some people that want to ask a Q&A before I talk too much as I normally do.
Yes. Yes, Carol, we have one interesting question. Is from Jason Sheldon, and this is a question for Ed Robinson. He's saying, when photographing live gigs, do you ever have to deal with a god awful rights grabbing contracts, and do you sign them, or are you prepared to walk away from them if they won't allow you to cross the offending clauses out? If so, what is the worst contract you've been presented with? This is a bit more technical. So what would be good is perhaps to save this a bit later whilst we are still going.
I can answer it quickly.
Okay, great.
I can answer it quickly. So essentially, it's not limited to music or live events where we get presented with rights grabbing contracts. It actually seems to be rife throughout the whole photographic industry, and it's something where I sit as a member of the Association of Photographers on the board, and there is you should never sign something that you're not comfortable to sign or give away more than you should. However, there's always an area where there's a grey area for negotiation. There's an opportunity, sorry, for negotiation. And when dealing with artists, obviously, you have to expect that some of them, before you've even arrived there, before you've even been considered for that particular live event, you know that there's going to be a Beyonce or whatever that may have a certain requirement before you turn up. And I think it's about a professional respect and appreciation of the artist that you're there to photograph live. That means that there is sometimes a little bit more flex in those contracts. In terms of answering the second part of the question, which was, can you name the worst contract you ever received? My lawyers would advise me not to. I can't answer that.
Right, Ed. I think that's the perfect answer on something like that. Yes, Ellen.
I have something to say about that. I left the business before that started happening. I was confronted in later years. I did a few events and they wanted me to sign it, and I never did. But I think there was one album cover that I did later years. And what I did was I said to the record label, I said, look, you can have all the rights you want to whatever you want to do with the photographs, but I have rights also. So you can, as long as you have what you need, after you're done with this album, you're never going to look at these pictures again anyway. That was the case in those years anyway. So as Ed said, there is a way to negotiate this stuff, and they were very happy with that. And so that worked out fine.
Yeah, it's called fair usage, and that fair usage means that we should surely be able to, as artists ourselves, have, as long as there's been an approval of certain images, if they are wanted by the other artists that we're photographing, that we can use later in our portfolios as well.
Let me just stop you there. We're getting very technical, and whoever asked the question, if you want some counseling and advice, if you live in the UK, I do suggest you contact the Association of Photographers, and they have legal people that deal with that exclusively. I want to ask one thing before we ask another question. One of the things that I find in terms of music photography is when we used to have the platform where you had vinyl LPs and you had big juicy albums, and now everything, you know, whether you're streaming or you're listening to I don't know what, the visual impact is not there the way it used to be. Sometimes I would just buy an album because the cover was such a strong photograph on it in terms of the artist. And we've sort of lost that kind of billboard kind of impact of associated with music, with the streaming and so on. Panvera, you said there was a question for Elliot? Panvera?
Yes, so the question is, can you please describe Woodstock a bit in more detail for us?
You mean the Woodstock?
Whoa.
The pictures that you, it says the pictures that you didn't show.
My goodness. Gosh, how can you talk about a picture, right? So on my website, which is my name, elliottlandy.com, there's about 100 pictures of Woodstock, and I suggest you go there. Basically, I just wandered around. I had stage access, which meant that I was on stage a lot, and that was both good and bad because I didn't get into the crowd enough. Because I was one of the only photographer, more or less, not the only one, maybe one other one, had full-time stage access. But I don't know. I think you should look at my website or the book Woodstock Vision: The Spirit of a Generation. In UK, anyway. I think those two things is the most I could tell you, unless it's a specific question about feeling or something. That's as good as I can do for
Let
that.
me ask you a question, Elliot. And that is nice in Woodstock, looking at your catalog of imagery, and I want to ask the same about everyone else. Is there one picture that you keep revisiting that really you love the picture and how you captured it and the backstory? A favorite picture of all the imagery that you've captured? Do you have
You mean
favorite?
of all the photographs I've taken?
Yeah, a
Yeah,
favorite. Well, we could
yeah.
have more than one.
No, I could be very clear about that. It's the next picture I take. And I mean that sincerely, because for me, the thrill is when I see that photograph and then it's done for me. I see it, it's taken, I see it, and I said, wow, this is beautiful. And to me, that's what I keep searching for, is that next one. So, and I do love, but I still love the old, many of photographs I've taken in my life. I've done many different genres. The rock and roll period was about 2 years for me. And then I moved on to pictures of my children and my family. And you'll see behind me one of my impressionist flower photographs on the wall. But I keep, that's why I print them. I mean, I make prints and I sell them. But that's why if I didn't like these pictures, I couldn't, no matter how much money I was making from it, it just doesn't resonate with me to do them. But I keep printing them and I keep looking to print more. So I guess that's the answer I can give you.
Excellent. Vera, you going to ask ahead?
Yes, there's another question. So to everyone, please, which concert do you wish you'd had the chance to photograph, or which artist? And we'll start with Rachel.
I don't know. I've always said that, I mean, technically he's an actor, but he is also a musician, Steve Martin. But I'm not sure I could, because I think I'd probably cry. So I love him so much. I thought there may be a chance that when Q aren't around anymore, because he's in a bluegrass band, but who knows? Maybe one day, and I'll try not to cry. But yeah, Steve Martin, who's technically more of an actor. But yeah.
Ed?
I would say actually it would be Live Aid, but specifically I would say Queen at Live Aid back in the day. I think that was such an iconic concert. Band Aid and Live Aid. So Live Aid, where I just see the videos, I see the photography there, and I just think I wish I was there. And actually, it kind of those images come into my mind sometimes when I am at concerts. I think that would be the one.
All right. And Elliot?
So this is my favorite concert, you're asking?
An artist or a concert that perhaps you would have loved to have gone to, a concert that you missed.
Oh gosh. Yeah, Pink Floyd.
Not too shabby, not too shabby.
I may have seen them actually when I was living in Denmark before I started music photography, but I'm not sure. It was a friend of mine took me to this concert, and it was really the first thing I'm not even sure it was Pink Floyd, but yeah, for me, it's definitely Pink Floyd that I would have liked to have been to a concert, and I would have undoubtedly taken pictures if I was there.
All right. Well, everyone, this has been such a fun evening for me. I've really enjoyed it immensely. And I can't wait to meet some of you guys again if we're allowed to travel. And I mean, at this point in time, aside from I'm coming to the States and with all the kind of testing and everything else, but please come to London, Rachel and Elliot, when you can. And just to share with you, I think I said earlier that Ed is actually sitting in my house, and he's in another room. We're going to have some sushi after this.
And play some music. We need to
sushi.
turn the speakers up.
Indeed. Anyhow, thank you so much, all of you. This has been super fabulous. And I'd like to invite everyone that's tuned in, please join us for our next talk on Thursday, the 1st of July. I was hoping that the Thursday would end up being the 4th of July, but it hasn't quite made it. So it's 19 GMT time. The theme for the next talk is called Trailblazers, and it'll be the emerging stars in photography. The show will be co-hosted with Shoair Mablin, who is director of PhotoWorks, and will be in conversation with, I never pronounce these names, please forgive me if you tuned in, Shoair, Xaya Cruz Becani, Manu Filamani, and Silvia Rossi. And I'm familiar with all these artists, especially Silvia Rossi, and I think it's going to be a very exciting show to see what has inspired the stars that are coming up, the kind of work that they're doing, and who inspires them. So thank you, everyone that has tuned in today. I'm really enjoying doing these talks. I would like to also be out in the field in the wide places that I normally go, but this has been super fun, and it's been a massive learning curve for me in experiencing all the talks. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you panelists for making this a very exciting show. I can send you a big virtual hug and a massive kiss. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Pranver.